Good morning, good evening, good lunchtime, good coffee time, or wherever you're currently watching this from. Welcome to the second ever Flutter coffee show, The Widget Strikes Back. We are very happy to have you around, and we are very excited for the content we have prepared for the next hour or so. With the COVID situation getting worse in Europe again, we decided to go fully remote this time. So please be gentle with us. We'll try our best to keep this as smooth as possible, but the slip up here and there may happen.
We will try our best. And just in case you missed the first episode of the Flutter Coffee Show, the show came into existing to connect the community despite, as you all know, those challenging times. Doing meetups, exchanging knowledge and sharing the experience of developing software got quite difficult. And this is our take to give all Flutterists and Flutteristas a stage to present, share their knowledge, share their ideas, and to connect with each other and the whole Flutter community.
Flutter Coffee Show is obviously all about Flutter, but more, it is also about Dart, technology, and the people around it, because Flutter isn't just the code that is Flutter. With the Flutter Coffee Show, we try and we have mixed different formats such as unrated packages, coffee news, and different segments of people talking. And the Flutter Coffee Show is not just about code. The Flutter is more than that.
Yeah, we also take a look at different initiatives happening in the community. We present showcases and we give an update on the upcoming events, the conferences, and everything else happening in the Flutterverse. So far for the show in general, just in case you missed the first one. And where are my manners? Time to introduce you to our baristas for today. And I'm very happy to have you again on board, Norbert. And Norbert, who is you and what's your favorite widget? I think last time, what was your favorite widget last time we talked?
First off, thanks for having me, Mike. My name is Norbert, and I think last time my favorite widget was the container, just because it was so versatile. But this time I want to flip the question. I want to ask you first, what is your favorite widget and who are you?
Oh, well, thank you, Norbert. That's a difficult one. I very much like the confetti widget. Like, you can just give the user a quick hint that he did something great and successful, and you just push a button and the confetti comes down. And I saw it, and I'm still waiting for the use case where we can put it into our application and just have confetti raining all over the screen. And I think it's quite awesome and gorgeous.
I mean, do you really need some sort of use case for confetti? Isn't that something like everybody just agrees that it is the right thing to include?
I think that's the next level of user experience, putting confetti all over the place as soon as the user did something great.
Way to go.
Way to go. So who is you, Norbert, and what do you usually do on the daytime?
Yes, so my name is Norbert. You may have heard about me from one of my articles, talks, blog posts, or open source projects. I started developing Flutter apps about 3 years ago, and apparently I haven't stopped ever since. So it's just been that much fun. Right now, I'm working at a company, at an app. What about you, Mike? What are you doing, and how do you find Flutter?
So if it's not night, as it is currently in Germany, I'm the CTO of Neo Helden, and we build a digital assistant. And obviously, we do it with Flutter. And it was one of the best decisions we took a few years ago already. And you were also a part of it, Albert, as you know. And the technology choice came after I went with Ionic, after going with all those different technologies and React Native, and now switching to Flutter was by far the best decision we did on a technical term so far. But we have to be straightforward about it. This is not the whole team behind Flutter Coffee. So we both are the moderators, and there are gorgeous people, around 4 people more, which help us make this show reality, planning the content, also doing the regie remotely as of right now, which is quite difficult, or more difficult than it was in the studio before. And at this part already, a big thank you to all the people behind the show. So With all this said, and with us introduced, what's on the agenda for today, Norbert?
Yes, I'm very excited to announce that. We'll have a segment from Andrea where he'll talk about 16 Dart tips that you might not know. And if you didn't, those will be very handy to you. We'll also have an interview by David Dermier with Tim Sneath, and that is super exciting. I watched it, you'll love it. And lastly, we'll have the underrated packages segment back, but with a little twist, which I'll come to later.
Awesome. But before we jump into those talks, let's give us a quick update of what is happening in the Flutterverse in the last few days, or since the last show at least, and switch over to our correspondent of the Flutter Coffee News.
"100 tips to use Flutter and be a bro in Flutter development. The Flutter Community Plus plugins got released. Adopt a Widget initiative, and Flutter Vikings is coming into your town remotely." Welcome to the FCN studio. 100 tips to work with Flutter got released by Laxman Butteray, or Erluxman, on GitHub. He put together a list of 100 Flutter tips and publish them in a repository on GitHub. The tips range from development shortcuts, proper widget usage, testing instruction, library recommendations, and much more. In case you are interested, head over to GitHub and give it a star. The Flutter Community Plus plugins got released. The Plus plugins are a suite of open source Flutter plugins that take some of the most common packages to the next level. They have 3 main goals in mind, one of which is supporting federated plugins, which means splitting them up into separate packages for every platform and also supporting every platform, for example, web and desktop. This all while maintaining backwards compatibility, which eases the transition to those Plus plugins. They are planning to release stable versions of all Plus plugins supporting all platforms by end of mid-November. So stay tuned and head over to their website and contribute if you can. Extended material icon support for Flutter got released, which means that we get all those beautiful material icons in different kind of shapes and styles. For example, filled version, outlined versions, sharp versions, or even round versions of all those material icons already available. And as all with tree shaking support. So shake your trees, folks. If you ever wanted to contribute to the Flutter ecosystem, you can now adopt a widget. Just head over to GitHub, choose an issue, pick an issue, and ask to be assigned to solve it. This way you can contribute to the Flutter ecosystem. And in some additional news, Flutter Vikings is happening next week from 17th to 19th of November, 3 days online conference, the biggest Nordic Flutter conference so far. Head over to the website and secure your ticket. It's free.
So that was it with the Flutter Coffee News for today. Thank you very much, Outside Mike, for the news. As with every segment in our show, we're always looking for contributions, where it's ideas, content, or something that might be in the show. So if you have any idea, hit us up on Twitter. We're happy to talk. So Mike, what do you think about the Vikings, about Flutter Vikings?
Quite interesting. I had a look at the website, and there are already well-known people on the agenda with quite interesting talks. A few of them are still to be announced, but from those which are already announced, it seems pretty awesome. A few of them also were on the last Flutter Coffee Show, like Simon and Naval, and they will be speaking at Flutter Vikings. And I think it's a great format. And even though we are in a remote setting, I think we should maintain having conferences, doing events, even though it's a bit more difficult. So my question is, what's your take on all those remote conferences? Like, had you already your first remote conference talk so far, Norbert?
So it wasn't really a conference, but I did an online workshop the other day where I did a beginner's Flutter course for fellow students at my university through Microsoft Teams. And it was definitely an interesting experience because I did a workshop 2 times before in the GDG Dev Fest. And it's kind of different if you have people sitting in front of you where you can look at their faces and see if they understand what you're saying versus just 50 people being in the call without a mic or a camera. It worked. People were asking questions. We were having conversation, but it's definitely something different. It is super exciting and nice to see that even though you cannot meet in person right now, you can still have this sort of a community and learning together via online. What do you think about it?
Well, I think it's quite hard to have a conference without the respective after party. So you don't come to connect to the people in real life, and it's a bit different. And with the online format, I think it's quite difficult to tell if your audience is engaged, if they get what you're saying, or if they are okay with what you're saying. And I think it's a bit more difficult, and it imposes a whole lot of new challenges. I mean, only the technical implications when you have to check for audio issues, for video issues. Also now what we experience with the show, when you have to look for the proper lighting and all this stuff you usually don't have to think about and care about because you're on stage, you're in front of the audience, and it doesn't matter what kind of video quality you try to stream through your low bandwidth or low internet connection. It doesn't matter because you are in front of the people. And I think this is quite difficult, and this imposes new challenges, but it's still possible. It's challenging, but still possible. So I'm pretty hyped about Flutter Vikings, and I'm looking forward to all those talks happening. I guess 3 days in total, which it will happen next week. So quite interested to see what will turn out of this event. So funny you mentioned we have our you were part of a Google Developer Fest, like where Google developer experts can present something.
No, it's the GDG Dev Fest, where basically I'm not quite sure what the actual how this all works, but that's different spots throughout the world where there's people talking about Google technologies in general. It's a super nice way to connect with people, learn about new technologies, and just have a regional sense of community. So if you haven't heard about GDG Dev Fest yourself, I recommend when COVID is over to check it out and see if there's something nearby that you can attend.
Quite awesome. Just interesting to hear it because our next guest is also a Google developer expert for Flutter and Dart. And usually he is quite busy producing videos and new content for Flutter enthusiasts like us. And I'm even more excited to have him on board for today's Flutter Coffee Show. And Andrea Bisotto already produced more than 60 videos about different Dart and Flutter topics. And in the next segment, he will be teaching us about his personal top tips every Flutter developer should know.
Everyone, and welcome to this new video about the 16 Dart top tips that every Flutter developer should know. These tips will help you write more effective code in your Dart and Flutter applications. And whether you're an experienced developer or not, this video should have something valuable for you. So make sure to like and subscribe for more Flutter videos, and let's get started with my 16 top tips. Tip number 1. Did you know that Dart supports string multiplication? Well, Christmas is coming soon, so let's make a Christmas tree with a for loop. And all we have to do is to iterate from 1 to 5, and inside this loop, we can print this Christmas tree emoji times I. And if we run this code, well, here it is. It is not quite straight, but you can play with some padding and get the look that you want. But how is this useful in practice? Well, you can use string multiplication to easily check how a long string fits inside the text widget. For example, here we can multiply this string by 5, and if we hot reload, we can see what the text looks like. Tip number 2. If you need to execute multiple futures concurrently, you can use future.wait. For example, here we have a mock API class that tells us the latest numbers of COVID cases. And if we want to execute all these futures concurrently, we can just call future.wait and pass a list of futures. And the result of this will be a single future that contains the list of results. So by waiting on this future, we can get all the results as soon as they are available. Tip number 3. Did you know that you can add a call method in your Dart classes to make them callable like a function? Here is an example where we have a password validator class with a method named call. And because it's named this way, then we can use this class as if it was a method. In other words, we don't need to type .call here, and we can use the class instance directly like this. Tip number 4 is about how we can save some code when we want to call a callback that could be null. For example, here is a custom widget class that calls this onDragCompleted callback when a certain event takes place. Now, if this void callback is null, then calling it like this would result in a runtime error. And you may have written code like this to work around this problem. But actually, there is a simpler way, and that is to just call onDragCompleted ? Call with the null-aware operator. So this is how to save code when working with nullable callbacks. Tip number 5 is about anonymous functions and functions as arguments. In Dart, functions are first-class citizens, and this means that they can be passed as arguments to other functions. For example, here is some code that defines an anonymous function and assigns it to a variable. Then this variable is passed to this function, which takes a function argument, and then it is used to greet the user. And this code is valid because this function takes a string argument and returns a string. And this is exactly the signature of this anonymous function. So as long as the types match, then you can pass functions as arguments to other functions. This also means that when you use functional operators such as map, where, and reduce, you can define a function that performs the transformation that you want on your input values, and then you can just pass the function name as an argument to map. In other words, you don't need to expand this to an anonymous function because the signature of this function is exactly what the map operator expects. Tip number 6 is about collection if and spreads. Collection if and spreads are very useful when you write your UI as code. But did you know that you can even use them with maps? For example, here we are declaring a restaurant map, and we are only adding the average rating and the number of ratings if the add ratings variable is true. And we are doing this with a collection if and the spread operator, because here we are adding more than one key value pair. So make sure to use this to your advantage. Tip number 7 is about how we can iterate through a map in a null-safe manner. For example, let's say that you have a for loop and you want to run some code using all the keys and values of a map. You can do this by iterating on the entries variable, which will give you access to all the key value pairs in a null-safe way. So this code is more concise and less error-prone than iterating through the keys and then reading out the values, because in order to do this, you need to use the assertion operator. Tip number 8 is about how to use named constructors to create more ergonomic APIs. For example, suppose that you want to declare a class that can represent a temperature value. But because some people like Celsius and some people like Fahrenheit, you want your class API to be unambiguous. To make everyone happy, you can declare 2 named constructors for initializing your class with either degrees Celsius or Fahrenheit. And you can use initializer lists when you need to convert from Fahrenheit to Celsius. And this all means that you can declare temperature values like this and avoid any confusion. So make sure to use named constructors to improve the design of your classes. And while we are here, we should also talk about getters and setters, which is my tip number 9. As you can see, here I have declared Celsius as a stored variable. But again, users may prefer to get or even set the temperature in degrees Fahrenheit. And this is easily done with getters and setters that allow you to define computed variables, and you can use them like this. And now that we have this, it becomes easy to get or set the temperature with either Fahrenheit or Celsius. So make sure to add getters and setters if it makes it easier to use your classes. Tip number 10 is to use underscores for unused function arguments. The most common use case for this is when you have a widget that takes a function argument and you don't need to use some or all of the arguments that it gives you. In this scenario, you can declare these arguments with underscores, and this way your code is more readable, and it also carries more meaning because it makes it explicit that you are not using these arguments. Tip number 11 is about singletons and private constructors, and the most important property of a singleton is that there can be only one instance of it in your entire program. This is useful to model things like a file system, and in order to create a singleton in Dart, you can declare a named constructor and make it private with the underscore syntax, and then you can create one static final instance of this class by using this private constructor. And as a result, any code outside this file will only be able to access this class via the instance variable. So this is how you can create singletons, though in general it's best not to use them as they can lead to a host of problems if you are not careful. Tip number 12 is about using sets to represent collections of unique items. The most commonly used collection type in Dart is a list. However, lists can have duplicate items inside them, and sometimes this is not what we want. So whenever we need a collection of unique values, we can use a set. And we can declare a set literal using curly braces. This ensures that all the values are unique. And if we declare a const set, we even get a compiled error if we try to include two items that are equal. And when we work with sets, we have access to useful APIs such as union, difference, and intersection. So when you create a collection, ask yourself if you want its items to be unique and consider using a set. Tip number 13 is about how to use try and catch. Try and catch is often used when working with future-based APIs that may throw an exception if something goes wrong. And there are a few things that you should know. First of all, you can add an on clause that you can use to handle exceptions of different types. And you can also have a fallback catch clause that will handle all exceptions that do not match any of the types above. You can use a rethrow statement to throw the current exception up the call stack while preserving the stack trace. And you can use finally to run some code regardless of whether the feature has completed successfully or not. So if you are using or designing some feature-based APIs, make sure to handle exceptions as needed. Tip number 14 is about the most common constructors that you can use to create features in Dart. And these are future.delayed, future.value, and future.error. We can use future.delayed to create a feature that waits for a certain delay and then completes with the value specified in this anonymous function. But sometimes we want to create a feature that completes immediately, and we can use future.value or future.error depending on whether we want to complete with a value or an error. These can be useful in your test code when writing mock classes that simulate the response from your future-based APIs. Tip number 15 is about the most common constructors that you can use to create streams in Dart. So let's take a look at them one by one. You can use stream.fromIterable to create a stream from a list of values. Or if you have just one value, you can use stream.value. You can use stream.empty to create an empty stream. Instead, use stream.error to create a stream that contains an error value. And you can use stream.fromFuture to create a stream that will contain only one value, and that value will only be available when the feature completes. Finally, you can create a periodic stream of events by specifying a duration as the time interval between events and an anonymous function that can generate each event given its index in the stream. So when you work with streams, feel free to use these constructors as needed. Tip number 16 is about synchronous and asynchronous generators. In Dart, we can define a synchronous generator as a function that returns an iterable and uses this sync star syntax. And inside the function, we can generate or yield multiple values that will be returned as an iterable when the function completes. Now, this is a synchronous generator, but we can also create asynchronous generators. An asynchronous generator is a function that returns a string and uses this async star syntax. And inside the function, we can yield values just like we did in the synchronous case. But if we want, we can await on future-based APIs because this is an asynchronous generator. So it's good to know about synchronous and asynchronous generators, as sometimes they can be handy. All right, so this wraps up my list of 16 top tips for Dart developers. If you want to see a summary of everything that we have covered in this video, you can find a transcript on my website at codewithandrea.com. Also, if you head over to my tips page, you will find some pages called Dart and Flutter Easy Wins. And here you can discover additional tips about the Dart language. Finally, if you are new to Dart and Flutter, or you want to improve your knowledge of the Dart language, you can buy my complete Dart course on Udemy. This contains 10 hours of content covering the most important features of the Dart language, and it also includes exercises, solutions, and practical projects that will help you build your confidence with Dart. And you can buy the course for a discounted price by entering this URL in your browser. And I'm confident that this will help you in your Dart and Flutter programming journey. If you've enjoyed my list of top tips, please like and subscribe for more Flutter videos. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you on the next video.
Wow, that was quite a lot of content. And I'm very happy to actually announce that we have Andrea on board at the Flutter Coffee Show with a live interview. So welcome, Andrea.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me. I'm very excited to be here. So, yeah.
Thank you for taking the time, and thank you for your talk. I mean, it was quite awesome to see all those technical tips. But one question before we jump deeper into the technical questions from the audience, maybe. With all those technical questions so far, what's your best personal tip or life hack you would give a striving Flutter beginner as of today?
Oh, favorite one. I think I was more prepared for what's your favorite widget question. I already had one in mind, but now you turned it around. So I guess, yeah, with Dart, it's fundamentals, right? I think one of the things that I really enjoyed when it came out, it was all the support for the collection operators. So all the collection if, collection for, and spread, which are already available to some extent in some other languages. But they really fit in very nicely with the declarative UI programming model that we use in Flutter. So I guess if I had to mention that it's off the top of my head, it would be those ones. Yeah.
Awesome. And quite cool. We had one question from the audience, and I think it was Osama Asif, and he asked to elaborate the try, catch, and rethrow in more depth. The question is, is there a deeper level than what we saw?
Well, I guess it all comes down to the fact that when you write code, whether it's a program or an app, it's always good to think about the happy part, but also think about possible errors and failure scenarios that might happen. So especially when we work with asynchronous APIs, so anything that, for example, returns a future, there is kind of this convention in Dart, and you'll find it with the official packages, you'll find it with a lot of third-party packages as well, that when you're calling into a future-based API, you either get a feature that completes with a successful response, so you get an object back. But if something goes wrong, typically something is thrown at you. So internally, the code that you're calling will be throwing an exception. So in terms of, there is something deeper to that. Yes, I mean, there is a base exception class that is meant to be implemented by all exceptions. So a lot of the Dart packages that you might be using do that. And so when you do your try and catch blocks, you can catch on specific exception types that will implement that base exception abstract class. But you can also write your own. So if you are saying, for example, writing a wrapper for a REST API, then keeping that in mind, if you are creating APIs that are based on features, when something goes wrong, you should probably think about what kind of exception do I need to be using and exposing as the API creator. So I guess it's about how you design the errors and exceptions that your libraries or packages can throw. And even if you're not writing packages, think about that when you write your code.
What's your practice to expect the unexpected? I mean, I know, for example, Sentry. I don't know if you used Sentry in a test or production app. They try to handle the unexpected by just logging it to a remote service and make it touchable that there was an exception. Is this also something which you use when developing apps, or how is your approach if the unexpected hits the fence?
Yeah, I think you need a mix of both approaches. I mean, as a diligent programmer, I guess you try to write tests for your apps. You try as much as you can to think about all the possible error cases and handle exceptions and propagate exceptions on the code stack. But that being said, that there's always the possibility that you didn't think about something. And so that is when having like remote logging capabilities may help you. And the worst kind of scenario for you to be dealing with is when you have errors that happen in production and you haven't figured them out ahead of time. So yeah, definitely, I would say you need both strategies. You need to have some crash reporting service, whether it's Sentry or Crashlytics, that can report this for you. And yeah, then you can keep an eye on those things coming in.
Quite a good practice, I guess. At least when you miss the exceptions on development, I think it's hard to catch every single one of them, even though you try most of them.
So just to move the topic to something a bit different, your Dart course. One interesting fact I like to hear about such project is, what was the original intention of starting this? How did you start doing this course?
With the course, yeah, I think the Dart one specifically is an interesting one. It really all started with null safety. So the tech preview was announced around May or June, and that's something that I looked after. I looked forward to this for a long time. Coming from Swift, I was used to null safety from the beginning, so I couldn't wait to get a Flutter and Dart version of this. And then I started looking around in terms of what is there with regards to Dart that covers this. And I guess at the time it was just a technical preview, so there wasn't much. But more broadly, I just started looking at tutorials for Dart, and I didn't really see a kind of whole comprehensive course or tutorial that would kind of cover it all. So I thought, you know what, the language is now going through this major change, so I'm just going to do a course for it. And it took me always far longer than I thought it would. But yeah, I wanted to make really a good beginner comprehensive course that starts from the basics. So you start with Hello World, but then it goes all the way to some of the more fancy things like factory constructors, streams, asynchronous programming, generators, all those things. And I guess especially because I have other courses as well, I see that a lot of the time the questions that I get are to do with the fundamentals. And if you go online, you find some really good stuff already about Python, JavaScript. All those languages have amazing beginner courses, but I didn't see one for Dart. So I thought that was a good opportunity to make one.
Sounds awesome. So for everybody, definitely, if you haven't already or you want to learn more about Dart, check out this course. You can find it if you search for Andrea. I'm pretty sure you will. Thanks so much for being on the show. Thanks for the segment. And let's get on to the next segment. So the next segment is called the arguably underrated package. And it's the same segment we had the last time, but I added the word arguably because the packages are not really underrated, but they're still interesting. And if somebody didn't know about them yet, that's something you could learn and use in your apps starting today. Segment is made by our very own Norbert. Have fun. Thank you for the kind words, future me. Today, for a second Flutter Coffee Show, I again have 3 arguably underrated Flutter packages. This time, they're called arguably underrated packages because, as you'll see later in the video, GitHub stars and publics say they're quite popular. But I still hope you have fun, you learn something new, and enjoy. Let's start off with the first arguably underrated package. I say arguably underrated because it has close to 1,000 likes. This package is still pretty cool, so I'm including it. Auto-size text, as the name suggests, automatically sizes the text. So what does that mean? Let's take a look. So here we have a simple app, a scaffold, an app bar, and we have a container in the center with a text which says text that fits into this box. It has plenty of space, as you can see, 200 by 200 pixels, and the font size is 25. But what happens if we decrease the container size? Let's say to 100 by 100. Okay, so the text wraps, it's not 3 lines, but the text size is still the same. So what happens if we decrease even further? Let's say 50 by 50. What we can see now is the text actually overflows, and we don't see parts of the text. We only see the first word. The rest is below it and is not visible. So let's revert, go back to 200. And let's replace the text by the auto-size text. Hot reload. And what happens now if we decrease the font size, the container size? As we can see, 100 by 100 pixels, still the same as the text. It can wrap and it can still fit. If we decrease this to 50, you can see that the text size is also decreasing because it is noticed that it wouldn't fit into the box otherwise. We can go even further and say the height is 52. And now text is super small, but it still fits in the box. So why is this useful? One common problem when localizing apps is that different words in different languages sometimes have different lengths. There's words that are very short in a language, but are pretty long in another. And one example is the word mole. Switch this text to mole and switch this back to text. If we reload, we can see this fits because mole is a pretty short word and the box is pretty small, but it fits. But let's consider we want to localize this to the German market. And in Germany, there's no such thing as a mole. Well, there is, but it's called Einkaufszentrum. And as you can see, the Einkaufszentrum is quite a bit longer. And if we try to hot reload, we see a problem. So what do? We can either say, okay, this app is only available in English. German people learn the word mole. Or we can think of a clever way to automatically resize this text to fit in the box. And that's where we can use auto-size text. Let's take a look at a few other properties the auto-size text package has. First off, we can specify max lines, which we want to be using. One really cool thing we can do is we can actually specify the minimum font size and the maximum font size. This is useful because even though it is nice to resize the text to be smaller to fit the content, if the text is too small, you cannot see it. So it doesn't matter that you can fit a whole book into 100 by 100 pixel container. Nobody's going to be able to read it. One very interesting feature too is the group property. Group property makes sure that multiple auto-size texts resize accordingly. What does that mean? One text is too big, scales down, and signals the others, okay, you have to scale down too. This is particularly useful when you have a list of bullet points, for example, and one bullet point is longer than the others, so you want to scale them down. But now it looks weird because every single bullet point has a font size of, let's say, 16. The one single one that is longer now has a font size of 12. So this takes care to scaling them down and just make them look as one. There's quite a few other properties this package has, and I have to say the documentation of this package is very good. So you should definitely check it out and see for yourself. Next off, we have a pure Dart package, and it's called UUID. Again, it has quite a few likes, but it's still very important, so it's included in this list. So to understand what UUID is doing for us, let's see and take a look at the problem. So imagine we have a Dart program and we have a class user. So for example, the user might have a field called name. And now we want users to reference other users. We want users to be referenced by other objects. So we need a way to reference a user without having an actual instance of the user. For this, we need some sort of key. In this example, we have one field, name. We could use the name as a key. The problem with using a name as a key is that you're making a restriction on your system. There can only be one user with one name. So somebody else comes along with the same name, that's too bad. By the way, this might work for example, online games where the username is indeed unique. There's no username which is given to people twice. But in this case, we want people to be able to have the same name. So for this, we include a new field called ID, and this is a string. So the problem now is, how do we create this ID? For example, if we create a new user with name Robert, an ID, let's say my ID, how do we know that somebody else who's also creating a new user isn't using the same ID as I am? We could use some sort of fancy incrementing of integers and doing all of that, but there's a way simpler thing to do. And for that, we have to use random numbers, and that's where UUID comes in. So first off, we import UUID. If we want to create a new ID, all we do is UUID and v4, and that generates us a string. So what we can do now is to print user.id, and if we run the start program, you see we have a nice random ID, and we can just generate a lot of these users with these random IDs, and we can be pretty sure that they won't collide. We won't go into the theoretical details of collisions of these, but it is safe to say you can use these IDs as unique identifiers. Last but not least, we have a package called Flutter icons. Did you know that the material icons that are included with Flutter are not the only icons you can use? That's right, there's way more icons to use for your Flutter mobile, desktop, and web apps. There's a bunch of different icon collections scattered around the web, and this package unites a bunch of them. So we can take a look at a few icon sets. So this one, the ant design, features quite a few nice items which are distinct due to their round borders. We have N2Po icons, which look pretty cool too. And there's so many more icons to explore. You're not bound to the material icons. So let's take a look at the code. The nice thing about all of this is that you don't even have to switch out your widgets. You can still use the old well-known icon widgets. So let's start by adding a new icon in there. And in the icon data, we don't use icons dot. We can still use that. But with this package, we can, for example, use feather.watch. And this is an icon from the feather icon set. And we can try a bunch of different icons. Let's say we want to try the ant design icons, the camera one. And as you can see, they have their own unique designs and styles. So you are sure to have a lot of variety, and you can really choose those icons that match perfectly with your brand.
Pretty neat format, Norbert. So how did you find all those packages you were currently talking about? What's your approach to find them? Are you scrolling through, I don't know, Flutter News? Are you watching the Flutter Coffee Show every day?
Well, yes, I'm actually watching Flutter Coffee Show. I'm even part of the Flutter Coffee Show, but that's not my main source of inspiration. So for these packages, I actually looked at a few code bases I've been working on, and I noticed, for example, the auto-size text, and I've been thinking I'm using it a lot, and it's such a cool package. More people should know about it. UUID, same. I'm pretty much using it in every one of my projects. The feather icons, I actually stumbled across this while just searching for different packages. And I remember looking for different icons a while back. And when I saw this package, it just made it so easy to use those. So I had to include it.
So just going around and taking a widget there, a package there, and in the end you have like a good repository of awesome plugins.
Exactly. It all comes down to time and experience. Over time, you just accumulate more knowledge, more packages you have used, and you have vetted yourself. So over time, you just build up all the knowledge of what is good, what maybe isn't that good, and that's just part of the process.
Yeah, quite cool. We had a lot of questions coming in for Andrea and his format, and we thought, okay, well, we have to answer a few more of them. And Andrea has some time left, and he's again. Well, welcome back, and thank you for taking the time again.
I didn't make any other plans for the night, so it's all right.
Nothing to go to these days.
Yeah.
Yes. So as we talked at the very beginning of the show, the Flutter Coffee Show is not just about the code and the actual implementation. It's about the community, about the people. So it is our very duty to answer all the questions we can, and we try. So one question, if I remember correctly, which we saw, was from Thomas. He asked how to push Flutter at your company, if I'm not mistaken. Andrea, do you have any ideas, opinions, or experiences regarding this topic?
See, normally I expect the technical questions, and now somebody is asking me more the businessy ones. So,
I mean, even if it's not your main expertise, it's always nice to hear more opinions.
Yeah, it's okay. It's a good one. I think this is one that many people have tried to answer. I don't even remember what the main kind of answers to that are, but I guess it boils down to what also your team is comfortable with. Like every company is different. And when I actually started doing Flutter, I was at an agency where they had a lot of different teams. They had a very strong kind of team on iOS and a very strong team on Android. So it was going to be a hard sell to get people to get onto Flutter. And I just got a project doing that because it was approved by one of the clients beforehand. They had other reasons to go with Google platform. So we started using that. And as a developer, what I saw within the first 2 or 3 weeks of that project was how much faster I was going at delivering things. So if you actually can show tangible value in a short amount of time, say maybe you need to build an application that is quite complex, but if you can in a short time get the buy-in to say, you know what, give me a few weeks and I can at least de-risk some of the most important things that the application needs to do. I think if you can prove that for the things that are a bit more tricky, then you can have the argument that everything else is probably going to be smooth sailing. But I guess you have to try to tackle the pain points early and show that you know what you're proposing is capable of doing what they want, and then you can also talk about the benefit that you save time, that you need less developers, you need less QA effort, and all of that.
So, Mike, I know you have a company, and know you are using Flutter. I remember it wasn't a hard sell for you to use Flutter. You were very passionate and you wanted to use Flutter. Why was that, and how did you decide that you want to pursue using Flutter at your company?
If I remember correctly, I had a pretty decent working student in my company, and I put him up with the challenge. Pretty what you were saying, Andrea, with the time saving. I put him up with the challenge to re-implement our existing application within a time frame of about 2 weeks and a bit more. It took a bit longer, but the results he came up with were a lot better stability-wise and performance-wise than what we had with our existing application, which we were developing for about a year by then. And this guy was Norbert, actually, to be honest about it. But we saw how quickly we were able to iterate and improve the overall stability of the technology underlying. And if I come from a background from hybrid applications especially, and using web frameworks. And the issues you're tackling there are pretty often repeating in some form, and the stability issues are pretty repeating. And you in the end, you don't grasp how much time you're potentially wasting just by fixing the same issues again and again. And this, as long as we are using Flutter now, never happened to me again. And this was for me the most selling part about using Flutter, not only because the developer experience is far better than what I have been using the last few years before, but also because of the general stability the application provides both on iOS and Android, and now even on desktop platforms and the web. And this is pretty insane. There were quite a lot of tries to actually build a framework or a solution or a technology to do actually that, and they all failed in the last few years, in the front-end area at least. And as far as I can tell, I think Flutter is the most ambitious project to bring a front-end development framework even more forward. And I'm pretty hyped about to see the next few years. I guess it will be insane, like a new paradigm shift of what we experience in the Flutterverse so far.
Good point. I just saw we have quite a few questions actually. So how about we just pick them up and try to answer them as fast as we can, so we can actually try to answer most of them to continue with the show. So what do we have here?
Hitesh asked, does rethrowing an error means throwing it to the top of the call stack, to the calling code, or throwing it just one level up the call stack?
Okay, 30-second answer. Let's see if I can make the answers quick as well. So yeah, it will throw it up to the point where you catch it. So it will throw it one level up. If you have a try catch on the next level with that exception type, then it will be caught. But if you don't, it will keep going all the way up to the top of the stack. And if nothing is catching it, then it will become an unhandled exception at the top of the code stack.
So the question is, how is your architecture layered in general, and where do you put the exception, or where do you try to catch those exceptions? And you can, like, in purpose, let them bubble up at a point where you really try to handle them.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it's to do with also the layers and like what kind of exceptions you get. For example, if you're doing networking, the simplest case is you're using the Dart HTTP package to do some of that. And for example, if you're offline, that will throw you a socket exception that because you can't actually perform the request if you're offline, right? And then so as you go up the call stack, you also need to, I think, design the kind of exceptions that are appropriate to be bubbling up. So you might want to catch and maybe retro something else that is more meaningful for your domain layer in your application. And also, I guess, think about what kind of exceptions is it safe at some point for your code to handle, and what others should be user-facing. And so for the user-facing ones, you need to wrap enough information so that you can present a human-readable message. So yeah, I think when you design classes, whether they are service classes, blocks, whatever, if you are expecting to be handling some errors, you need to design the exceptions that go with it as well.
Okay.
Designing the exception handling, yeah. It's a difficult topic in general, but yeah. Osorio Rodriguez asked, Isolate does not work on Dart 2 for web anymore. I'm not familiar with the Isolate. Did you experience the same issue, Andrea?
To be honest, I haven't even worked with isolates up until now. It's not because of lack of, I guess, willing. It's just like I never built something that required using them. So I guess I'm familiar a little bit with the like interface and the general principle of isolates, but in terms of like specific things that might or might not be working, I might not be the best person to answer that. Sorry.
Yeah, I don't know too. Which packages or APIs would you use to create a video streaming application in Flutter?
So I saw an interesting thread about this on Reddit recently, with a lot of people not feeling too positive about it. I mean, video streaming is a complex topic, and yeah, to be fair, I think on other platforms by now there are more stable packages that can be used for that kind of task. From the feeling I get from the community and people that have tried, we are not in such a kind of nice situation at the moment with Flutter. And I guess at the same time, there's so many packages coming out all the time. It's hard to know. I mean, I haven't tried recently, so I don't know what would be the best one at the moment. I don't know if there is one that is production ready. So yeah, I think we need to expand the question to other Flutter enthusiasts and people that have tried.
If anybody in the comments knows more, feel free to answer. I think Mike and me don't know too much about video streaming in Flutter either. Am I right?
It's quite hard. We also struggle with video content and processing video, audio, and image data, as all those native touch points most often lead to difficulties in processing in general. And you have the native touch points where a lot of the community plugins currently also have the stability phase they have to go through until they are really, really stable and ready for production, I guess. We have one awesome last question, and I think it might be an insider question.
I don't actually know even what I'm supposed to divulge about this. I'll just say I didn't buy it. It was a gift. Barry came and gave me this nice present.
Nice.
Awesome. Thank you again, Andrea, for taking the time and joining the show. It was very great to have you on board. We wish you all the best with the courses. Keep up the great work. Keep up spreading the love of doing Flutter apps, Flutter applications, and doing Dart programming in general. We'd love to see you in the future again. And so far, so good. Have a nice evening in London, and take care.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been great to take part. I had a lot of fun. So yeah, hopefully the rest will be just as great as what it's been until now. Yeah.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, next off, we have the long anticipated segment. The Very Good Talk is a segment from Very Good Ventures focused on interviewing leaders of design, business, and technology. Very Good Ventures is a consultancy providing full service app development and is helping companies adopt Flutter. If you're a fan of Flutter, you have probably already heard about one of the first guests, and it's no one else than the famous Tim Sneath.
In case you don't know Tim already, he is the Director of Product Management for Flutter and Dart at Google. So he's essentially the guy who has a pretty decent voice in the future direction of where Flutter is going. And I'm very excited about the first Very Good Talk. And let's see what David DeReamer from Very Good Ventures and Tim Sneath from Google have to say.
Hi, my name is David DeReamer of Very Good Ventures, and this is a Very Good Talk. In these segments, we'll talk to leaders in technology, design, and business to get their perspectives on the past, the present, and the future. Since this is the very first Very Good Talk, we needed someone special, and I could think of none other than Tim Sneath of Google. Tim, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, hi everyone, I'm Tim Sneath. I look after a couple of teams at Google focusing on developer technologies, in particular Flutter, which is our mobile toolkit for building apps for a desktop, mobile, and web from a single code base, and Dart, which is a programming language that you use to build apps for Flutter.
Awesome. So what's something you're working on like right now, like this week?
A few different things that are going on. We're in the very interesting season of planning at the moment for Google. So we're doing 2021 planning and figuring out what are the places where we invest our various treasures, whether they're the people, the money that we have. Also planning a few event-related activities that I can't talk about right now.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, sounds good. I'm sure everyone would be like itching to hear all about that stuff, but we'll have to wait and see. So I wanted to take a step back, and so everyone probably on the Flutter Coffee Show here probably knows that you work at Flutter. I wanted to go back in time and say, like, how did you get here? Like, what early influences affected how you got to where you are today and get to be in this role at Google?
Gosh, here is itself an interesting question. Well, gosh, I've always been a computer guy, right? That was always the thing when I was at school, and I was should have been studying math and physics and all the other subjects. I was hiding away in the computer lab, playing truant almost, playing with Macs and PCs and some of the before that, some of the 8-bit computers that were around in the UK growing up, and I always dreamt of working at Microsoft. Actually, that was my dream. I remember getting started on Windows 286. I think was the first release. My dad brought home an old PC from work, and I started playing with very early things like that. I always dreamed of being a Microsoft employee. And so, yeah, at school, I spent a lot of time programming. I went to college and was so excited to discover you could actually do a whole degree of just playing with computers under the auspices of a title like computer science. So that was my thing. And then, I wound up spending 17 years at Microsoft. Was lucky enough to sort of almost fall through the back door there. I was doing some independent talks around different aspects of development with Microsoft technologies, things like VB, and they had this thing called Visual InterDev, which was a web tool in those very, very early days. And so wound up there. And then joining Google was almost another just very sort of serendipitous thing, really. I hadn't even just heard of Flutter, and I got this cold call from vice president at Google, and I nearly put the phone down on him, but he just said enough in the first couple of sentences to just pique my interest. And the more I discovered about what we were building in this broad space, the more I realized, wow, this might be the one thing that pulls me out of this long Microsoft career. And so that's kind of the story of how I got to Google and started working on Flutter.
That's awesome. I feel like my first programming I ever did was on a TI-82 calculator, and I wonder how many people in the Flutter community know what that is, or know what a lot of the things you rattled off. VBA, what's that? So
yeah.
I wanted to ask you.
In the UK, there's a big thing around Sinclair computers. There was a sort of a whole 8-bit sort of scene that didn't really exist here in the States, and it's amazing how many of my colleagues, even to this day, they got their first start in the industry through ZX Spectrum or the BBC Model B. These are sort of like some of the classic UK computers that even other things like games. Companies that sort of got started developing on those things are now building for Xbox and so on and so forth.
Oh, that's amazing. That's really cool. So what's your favorite piece of technology of all time?
Oh gosh, of all time. That's an impossible question to answer. Well, I mean, I do still have some of these devices that I still play with. I don't know if you can see. I'm going to twist my camera around a little bit, but in the background, I've got an old iMac here. I continue to play with a whole variety of these different retro computers because there's something very simple about their cleanliness of architecture. You can understand what's going on. Today's computers, there's so many layers of complexity, and even a compiler, right? What it's compiling to is there's so many bits of smartness there that means you can't write a line of code and have any real sense of the assembly it'll generate. So I still love those sort of simplicity experiences where you can see you write something and you know exactly what the computer's going to do. And so I have a whole swathe of a cupboard full of old Macs, old Sinclair computers, different sort of devices like that to play with.
That's awesome. I guess it's a good segue into my next question, which is there something like piece of technology or a hobby or interest that you really love that you think a lot of people don't know about you? Something that is kind of your a special hobby or interest.
I like to end the day winding down with the New York Times crossword. That's might be my thing for a while. When I first came to the States, it was something I couldn't make much progress with, and I think there were too many cultural touch points that I just didn't have to be able to be successful at this. And I gradually have worked my way up. There's that old thing about it takes 10,000 hours to become proficient at something. I've probably spent my 10,000 hours now, and so now I've sort of been on this just regular every night. I work through the crossword, and I think I'm up to something like 800, 900 day streak at the moment of doing the New York Times crossword. So that's my little goal.
Knows where Ken came from, the Ken Flutter, the origin story.
Right.
Awesome.
Yeah, that was a pitch that was easy to make. To go and to meet with some of my heroes over there in New York Times was pretty fun.
That's amazing. So given your context there, the history, what you do now, what is your sort of overall relationship with technology as a person, not necessarily as a business person, and like how does it make you feel today in 2020?
Yeah, I mean, I think it can be a great enabler, but it can also be a defense or a blockade from the real world. That there's nothing revolutionary I can say here about the challenges of social networks, of creating cliques that sometimes operate in an echo chamber. There are definitely some costs associated with technology if it's not used thoughtfully and well, like all things. But for me, like I came to the States in 2004. We had two very small children at the time. My wife's parents still lived in the UK, and talking to them was incredibly frustrating. It was a sort of a phone call that was expensive, or it was MSN Messenger, tiny little postage stamps, the thing where you could barely see each other, and the voices were unsynchronized, and it was almost like a moving slideshow. Whereas now, my parents and I will pick up and do a video call just with no notice, and it's HD. It feels like we're in the same room together. And particularly at this current time with COVID, right, being able to just remove those boundaries is such a wonderful enabler, and not just for family to family, but in general. There's such a missed opportunity there for people to understand each other better and to see the world from a different perspective. And I often wonder what the opportunity for a startup is around that space. Giving people the chance to see the world from a different perspective. Being a pen pal these days is not writing a letter on that blue sort of very thin, crinkly airmail paper. You can really get to know a different situation well, and I wish that we could break down more boundaries with technology.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Yeah, I think certainly if there's one sort of silver lining to this year, it's that technology has broken down a lot of boundaries and gotten a lot of people on Zoom calls and meets and stuff. Mm-hmm. And people that never did that before are doing that. I remember being a kid in my grandparents' room, house, reading some magazine where it was like a physical phone with a dial pad and a video screen, and it was like the future of phones, and they were not wrong, but they were just a little bit off in terms of how it was going to be executed. So recently, or just the other day, you had on Twitter, and to the point of current state of technology, you had this kind of notion of like the current slabs of aluminum, sort of like the lack of joy in some of the devices that we have out there and stuff. And I was just thinking, it's true. I feel the same way. And, it's almost a little bit sad that we have all this technology progress, and yet some of that joy is sort of like that device over there, how whimsical sort of that industrial design was. And I think in terms of us as app developers or as technology people or startups, somebody getting started, what are how can we address that? How can we make sure that we don't lose the joy in the things we make?
Yeah. Well, I think part of it is just that sort of personality that you're describing there, right? When we create software, when we create anything, our opportunities for some of that humanity to shine through, that it doesn't all become just very corporate and standardized. Technologies like Flutter, of course, help a little bit with that, because it makes it easy to create your own custom look and feel for any app you're creating. But it's more than just the visuals there. It's also just about, again, that sort of inhabiting a very human approach to software design that we a little more informal. There's this sort of tendency, even in things like the user interface text that people write, to write it in this very corporate sort of passive voice, the computer was unable to process the command kind of way, rather than a little bit more of that, again, human to human sort of interface that is the pattern through which humanity has been surviving for tens of thousands of years. And I think the key to technology moving forward is to shift back to a more personalized approach. And with things like AI and ML, we have much more opportunity to create those kinds of experiences. And I'm intrigued to see how we can get there over the coming years.
Yeah, it's, you basically answered my next question, which was, what do you think our biggest sort of problem to solve right now is? That's obviously a huge question with so many possible questions and answers. What do you think? Like, what is the most important problem we could be maybe solving today with all of this amazing technology we have?
Well, again, I'm very general, so it's tough to say the most important one. But I think when we look at the human condition and some of the challenges that we have, they again come down to boundaries of loneliness, boundaries of disparity, inequality between people, and technology can be a solution to some of those problems. One of the things that I've enjoyed recently has been seeing the growth of products like Flutter outside of the typical kind of West Coast Bay Area kind of spaces. Some of the most innovative apps that I've seen recently have been coming from sub-Saharan Africa, for example. And there's incredible intellectual talent, resourcefulness in parts of the world that don't normally get to be on the headlines, or if so, for the wrong reasons. And that boundary breaking is potentially an opportunity for some of these very, very talented folk to be known on a world stage, not because of where they live or the opportunities that they've been granted, but because of their natural skills and resources. So, as I get old and crusty, I start thinking about, how come, but I play a part there in helping others, get their voices heard better. And I think if we can all achieve a little bit there, we'll have done something useful.
Yeah, that's amazing. So I want to transition. We're almost done, almost out of time. So I wanted to do a quick little game. I'm going to name like a word or put something out there, and I just want you to say bad, good, or very good. And maybe expand on it a little bit, but just rapid fire. We'll do this real quick, and then we'll wrap up. So ready to go?
Sure.
Right, ready? So bad, good, or very good? Ready? Windows.
Oh, very good. Very good. 1 billion plus users. Amazing.
All right. iPhone 12.
Good. A little bit incremental to the last version, but it's a nice design.
All right. Right on. Social media.
In the bad to good sort of side, depending on who's using it and why.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Open source software.
Very good. What an amazing opportunity it has been to expand access to all kinds of incredible things.
Yeah, absolutely. Silicon Valley.
Good. I love the optimism and the entrepreneurship and the opportunities that come from Silicon Valley, although it can be sometimes a little bit of an echo chamber.
What about Silicon Valley, the show?
Never seen it.
Okay. All right. Virtual reality?
I haven't been impressed so far. myself, I've yet to have a virtual reality experience that has blown my mind, other than spatial audio. The sort of thing that Apple have done with their AirPods Pro is incredible. I feel like I've entered a whole separate soundscape. That's the biggest jump since mono to stereo, as far as I'm concerned.
Awesome. What about simulation theory?
My masters in the ether say I can't say anything about that. I've no idea whether it's a thing or not.
Okay. All right, last one, unicorns.
Great. Yes, particularly when they wear sunglasses.
Yeah, awesome. Well, there's a double-edged, there's multiple meanings to that one. So it's always a test to see where people go with it. So, well, that's all we have. Thank you so much, Tim, for the time. Hope you had fun. I had a lot of fun, a lot of smiles during this, and it was really awesome. So I know you're a super busy guy, so thank you for taking the time, and I hope everyone enjoys the show.
Thanks. Nice to chat.
All right, see you later.
Wow. Thank you, David. Thank you, Tim. It was a great interview. I think we all learned a few insights and had a lot of fun listening to this very interesting interview. Mike, what was the first computer you ever used to program something?
Oh, wow. I think, no offense, we are a whole different generation. But I remember I had a computer from my grandmother, and it ran MS-DOS. And it could not even connect to the internet. So it was quite interesting if you compare it to today's technology and computers, but I think it in some form shapes your understanding of how technology works. And it was just an MS-DOS computer, like so a huge thing. You put it on and it took about 2 minutes to boot up and something, but I think this is where technology is coming from. And I always like to remember from where we started, and it gives you a bit more experience. And to sum it up, like, it's totally awesome that we had Tim Sneath on board for this show, and that we have very good ventures with the first very good talk on board. And I'd love to see more. It's totally awesome. So definitely want to do so. We had a few more questions from the audience while the talk was happening. And for example, Osorio Rodriguez asked, how can I join in the discussion next time? Is there a speakers list or something?
So a speakers list per se not. We post on Twitter, and we are always open to suggestions, people wanting to be on the show, discussions, anything. So the best way to get in touch with us and being part of the show is just reach out to us. We're super happy to have everybody on the show. Everybody who wants to contribute in some way can. So right now, reach out to us. We regularly also tweet and search for ideas and people. So just let us know. We'll arrange it.
Yeah, reach out to us on Twitter, and we will respond, and we will make it happen. I guess we can have a few more topics. We also asked what kind of topics the community and you as the viewers want to see in the next few shows. And one answer from Noberto was animations. What's the thing with animations?
Like I have to say, animations, that's perfect as a topic. Like, we can do a full episode, a full coffee show just on animations. I have so many ideas, so don't even think too much about it, because we have that set and covered.
Definitely. I think animations would be a very great topic, and is definitely something we might jump into in the next few shows. And one last comment from Tobias Kietzmann was, I'm interested in best practice using Riverpod and Change Notifier. Pretty specific topic. Might be something in a special, I guess, state management show. We had it in the first Flutter Coffee show, where a lot of questions about state management and best practices came in. I think this would be fitting, wouldn't it, Norbert?
That would, yeah. Like, state management, it's the never-ending topic. Even though there are solutions, and quite a few, there's never a real solution. Everybody uses it a bit differently. Everybody has different opinions. So just talking about it is like the best thing we could do. We'll have to see if we can coordinate and fill a whole episode with only state management and nothing else. We obviously always have a bit of state management in every episode because that's just inevitable, because that's like the number one question. But yeah, state management, we should do that.
And somebody asked, I am new to Flutter, what do you recommend? I'd say I'd recommend watching the next episode and the next show. And I want to thank you all, viewers, wherever you currently are. Thank you for taking the time and watching the second episode of the Flutter Coffee Show. We hope you enjoyed today's remote version of the Flutter Coffee Show. And we will be back in the next year with another round of fresh Flutter news, showcases, technical deep dives, and awesome talks about all those topics you're so enthusiastic about. And I hope you enjoyed the show. Please stay in touch with us and follow us on social media. Send us your ideas, your feedback, and your contributions in some form. And wherever you are, stay safe, stay healthy, and see you next time. Thank you very much for today's show.
Have a great time and see you.